Okay, hello class. This is going to be the lecture on the first chapter that we're talking about, and basically it's just an introduction to mass communication and the transformation we're having from the old analog to the digital world. It's still going on. We still read newspapers. They're in magazines. They're being hurt. But basically, other media really have gone through that digital revolution. Television signals are now digital, radio signals are becoming more digital, and they're even moving more in a digital fashion where the content isn't on what we would consider an old TV, an old radio set, whatever. So again, as we move through this semester, we'll talk more and more about that. Here, we're just going to get sort of an introduction to sort of an overview of what we're looking at. Again, telephony. Basically, that idea of a telephone. I grew up with a telephone in the kitchen that was basically hardwired to the wall. We were weird in our neighborhood because we had two telephone lines in the house, and we had the little button that you could get to one or the other. I don't know why we had that, other than my dad was an executive at Chrysler, and we had one line for the kids and one line for my parents. Um, I think it really only affected my sister because she's the one that spent most time on the telephone, more than anything. But yeah, I meant that old idea of what a telephone is. Most people now are starting to do away with the old landline telephones. Um, so that's something that you have to look at, and how that is changing, and the idea of what a telephone line or what a telephone is. So looking at those areas. Again, telephone played a major role in those patterns of communication. It used to be that you had a party line. I think I have a business card here somewhere of one of my parents' early jobs, and it was their telephone number was like Woodward 54. That you called up, you got the operator, you told the person the telephone line Woodward 54, and I'm guessing that that was the street and then the telephone area on that street. I don't know, but I'm guessing that they put a little plug in the little wall, and that was the one for that street. To having the random numbers and direct dialing and all that kind of stuff. So, and then you went to personalized rather than party lines. So all of those started to change. The idea of telegraphy. Here, I got something to show you. Sorry about that. I was going through more of my parents' stuff, and I pulled out an old Morse code machine, where you could tap up and down on it. You attach the cables right there, and then there's the part that weighs down. It's old, and I guess it's pretty much, there we go. And I guess you undo that. I don't know how this works. Oh, there you go. And you learn the old you learn the old Morse code signals. So again, we went from that, in the grand scheme of things, not too long ago, the late 1800s, early 1900s, so within maybe 100 years, to basically our smartphones, which are more capable computing power than probably what we sent up the people to the moon with in the 1960s and 70s. So that's idea of this idea. Now you don't even have the element of voice. You have the element of video now in telephony. So again, it was not immediately thought of as an interpersonal communication device. Again, it was thought of as, when it was first developed, was point-to-point communication for basically shipping. It was that kind of thing, and as a matter of fact, the Navy had control over most of it for the early part of telephone. So that's something that we look at there. And again, just moving from that idea of communicating from point to point to being able to commute to every point, and as a interpersonal communication device. And now it's even an economic force. So that you have that. Again, this idea of what we move through. I mean, you got to remember, the iPhone is only about 10 years old. So this idea of what those cell phones were beforehand. I can remember the first cell phone I ever saw was when I was in college in the we won't talk about that. But it was basically, one of my professors had this little case with a shoulder strap on it, and the phone was down in it, and he could make telephone calls off it. But the technology was that big. And then smaller, 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 and now you've got these little handheld computers. And we want the latest and the greatest. And we didn't really have a clear purpose for what those cell phones were. The idea of what the smartphone is today is really kind of a convergence of two technologies of the early 2000s, late 90s. The Palm Pilot, that was sort of that little digital assistant that had all of your information in it, and the cell phone. The Palm Pilot didn't do anything. I think it could communicate with your computer, but it was just basically data sharing. It wasn't a cell phone. All really what Apple did was marry that idea of a Palm Pilot with the cell phone and make it a little bit easier to use. I take it back, make it a lot easier to use. So that's the kind of thing. They didn't invent any new technology. They didn't invent any of the things that went into a cell phone. They didn't invent touch screens. They didn't invent any of the stuff that went in. What they did was they married the technologies that were already there and really went after what consumers wanted. So that idea of early misapplication. Not sure how these new communications device, we test out various ideas. I think that's what's going on with the smartwatches right now. We're not really sure what the hell those things are for. Are they medical devices? Are they extensions of cell phones? What are they? I don't think anybody has a clear purpose of what that is, and whether that purpose has a big enough market for them. And again, that idea of new has historical roots. The iPhone wasn't new in terms of technology. There was no new technology that went into the iPhone. It was a convergence of technology that made it really popular. They had the idea of putting that telephone and the digital assistant together. And this idea of ownership and control. The idea of what a company could do. I mean, I think we are on the verge of a little bit more regulation in this area. Can an internet company have too much power? If you buy an Apple device, you've got to buy everything through Apple. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. Is that right? Should people have the right to buy software to put on the device that they bought? Or does Apple control that device from cradle to grave, in other words? because they can basically say, now this is done. We're not going to update this anymore. You've got to sell it. You've got to get rid of it and buy a new one. I think we're in that area with Amazon. Amazon having too much control over retail. The fact that they are now entering into the grocery store, they're using their market power in other areas of retail to basically control or gain control of grocery now. And I think more regulation will come towards that. They're using their income basically to monopolize all of retail. And that's what the Federal Trade Commission was created for. So those ideas are I think coming to a head. And we talk about convergence. What are the types of convergence that we're seeing in media? So there is, again, that coming together of computing, telecommunications, media in a digital environment. The three types are technological, that we've kind of talked about already. With the smartphone, with the personal digital assistant, and the cell phone. Then the economic, the convergence of media companies, a lot of extent with, say like, and it's just kind of Disney, with where they control television, radio. Their company has television, radio, publishing, and then you get into other areas such as tourism, such as movies, cinema, all of those things. There's media, non-media entertainment there. And then the vast amount of things that they own. They own Marvel Studios. They own Pixar. They own Disney Studios. What's the other one they own? They own a lot. So it's that idea of that economic convergence. And then the cultural convergence. That you kind of argue that's the kind of the same thing with what I was just talking about with Disney. But that idea of things culturally converging in an area where the culture bleeds over. So you could argue with Disney, you've got the idea of something such as a Marvel Studios basically controlling sort of what goes on in culture. Iron Man, the ideas of those areas that really do drive what the culture is all about. And then again, dealing with sort of attitude, value changes in cultures. And again, the media organization changes. And I wouldn't even say it's media organization changes. I would say that it deals with anything that is digitally over the internet. And that could be retail. Because that's where newspapers are going to end up. And when we get into media, we'll talk about what exactly is a newspaper. Because what we call a newspaper in the future probably will have nothing to do with print in it. It'll just be a legacy term that we refer to that. I wouldn't even say there's too much news in newspapers today. So the idea of technical convergence. Again, that rise of digital media and online communication networks. It gives people the ability to communicate real time, with organizations, with other people, that digital media network really has opened up everything. It allows people to produce their own media. Some of you might have your own blog. So you might be able to communicate out there and people follow you and see what you want to say. Obviously on Facebook, you've got people that have liked you. I post things on Facebook all the time. So it is that sort of idea of what's that kind of convergence. We didn't have that ability 15 years ago. I mean, the early 2000s. I mean, we just didn't have that type of ability. I mean, I wrote my dissertation basically on the rise of in-home computing networks. Back then, it was the old dial-up stuff with America Online and and using your phone line, and you had to pay by the minute. And then right after I finished that, you started to have the first wave of people getting the digital lines. Um, and now they've got cable modems, and it's faster and faster. And now you're even going beyond that and having the wireless access in lots of places. So they don't even do that. You access over cell phone signals. So that's something that really is trying to, again, drive that technological convergence of computing with cell phones. So, and again, digital media help us the way we use technologies. Again, the way we read newspapers, the way we access content. What's a television? Because lots of us don't see any television content on what would be considered a television set, the old-time television set. Lots of us are seeing it on computer screens, on cell phones. Um, we read magazines online. We do a lot of those kinds of activities that used to be done in an analog fashion with the printed piece of paper or over a radio set or something like that. We do that now through a digital device of some sort. Um, and taking it out of the media realm, shopping. I mean, somebody's talking now about being able to simply shop online with your voice. Again, the ideas of those Amazon and Amazon Prime and being able to talk to your little Echo, Amazon Echo, or whatever they call them, and say, order this online, and it shows up the next day. So that's something that it's really happening. So that's something that we look at. Economic convergence, again, merging of internet and telecommunications with traditional media companies. You've got, although he didn't merge them, Jeff Bezos bought the the Washington Post. He didn't merge them in that he owns the Washington Post. Amazon doesn't. Again, he's kind of merged them in sort of relationship. I bought a Kindle, you get a subscription. Yeah, I think I got, I don't know, 6 months of the Washington Post free on my Kindle. So that kind of convergence is going there. Again, the television networks buying up smaller properties such as in radio, or companies buying a television network. Look at Comcast. Comcast owns studios that produce content. They own the distribution of cable into homes, so the distribution, the television distribution system, and then they also own NBC and all of the things they own. Again, we talked about Disney. We talked about Google and what they're buying up. And again, not only just other traditional media companies, but companies outside of media that are able to deliver content or services. I mean, when's a Google going to start offering financial services? I mean, is it beyond the possibility that a digital media company, will merge with Walmart, and Walmart will offer online ordering with this digital media company, and it'll be available to you Here's an idea. Google and Walmart merge, and they buy Uber. Okay, so Google, you got your little Google Home thing there. You run out of toilet paper. Say, Google, I need toilet paper. Order toilet paper. That goes over to Walmart or Google Mart or whatever you want to call it, and it charges your account. The next Uber man they have passing through the store loads in your order in the little Uber car, and it's delivered to your door. You never had to step foot out of your house. They own the financial services. It was charged directly to your account. You get the bill at the end of the month for your TP. What's to keep that from happening? So that's something that you're looking at there. So that economic convergence that includes independent or dissimilar companies coming to be controlled by a single entity. That's what's happening with this idea of economic convergence. And then you've got cultural convergence, globalization of media content. When an American television show is popular in other countries. What was it that I was reading the other day in New Zealand? New Zealand's basically media comes from England and the United States. Some extent from Australia in terms of news and stuff. But the programming, the entertainment type stuff comes from the United States and Great Britain, the UK. So that's when you have those kinds of things. And I would say that the textbook kind of takes a little US-centric view of this. Because there is some other content that comes the other way, too. A lot of the shows that we like here got popularized in other places. American Idol didn't start here. It started over in Great Britain. Now, it was called something else over there. But, again, the concept came from the UK and was brought over here. So you have those kinds of things. A lot of the documentary programming and educational program that you see on things like PBS and other areas are done in other countries and brought over here. So that's something where I think this is a little bit too American-centric. And here what we're looking at, this idea of the production and distribution of what is in the media. Traditional media implies a passive receiver. The digital media, you can't be passive in the new digital media environment, because you've got to click, you've got to do something for the media. Television, how do you use television? The old television, you turn it on and you watch it. How do you use radio? You turn it on, you listen to it. Print media is a little bit different in that you have to actively read. The idea there is an action to begin with, but again, it's passive in nature with old television, old radio. Here you've got to click on things. It's fast cut. You've got to do stuff, and the content doesn't run in blocks of time. You've got to go to it on your schedule. So again, that idea of an active audience. And then you're also making your own media. You're doing things on your own and sending it out for people to see. So that's something that you look at there. What are the implications of this convergence? Well, they have tremendous implications. Again, the media organizations will change themselves. They'll morph into something else. Again, NBC used to be its own company. Then for a long, long time, General Electric owned it. But then General Electric sold it to Comcast. So now NBC is owned by what used to be a media distribution company. Comcast got into the idea of producing content. So organizations change. The media types change. Again, print media will be dead. The companies won't be dead, but the idea of a printed newspaper or a printed magazine will go away. You'll get those content on some sort of tablet or the computer, or however, whatever your form of media consumption will be, and it can be many different forms. It doesn't have to be one thing. It could be a desktop one day, it could be a laptop, it could be your phone, it could be your tablet, whatever kind of media content. And that's not to say that those are the only ones out there. There could be new media type changes. The content changes. I'm going to guess that the idea of the long format news magazine article will probably die, because our length of attention is narrowing a lot. We don't pay attention that long. So that there are societal implications about that too. But media content will probably change. Again, media use, that's already changed. Television, I would say probably within the next 10 years, television won't be watched on TVs anymore, other than if the screen device in your living room is where you access content. It's probably not a television. It's probably a glorified computer screen. It's just really big, and you'll dial up what you want to see there. But there won't be any programmed television. It'll be, I want to watch this episode of whatever, and you'll dial it up on what I envision is a big TV or a big screen with a tablet that will be what you kind of a enhanced remote, and you'll dial up material on that tablet. So it could be that, could be something else. Again, media distribution changes. That kind of goes around with media use change. The distribution of television, not through programmed time slots that you have to watch at that time to get it live. It will be some other point. The only thing that won't change will be live versions of stuff, because if you're going to watch live TV, you've got to watch it when that program is going to go on. But program television at a 8 o'clock time slot on a Tuesday evening, I think that's probably going to go away. Again, media audiences will change simply because as more and more people of the old media pass away, then the people that are used to the new way media is used, distributed, whatever, have a greater and greater voice in how those changes take effect. So again, the audiences will obviously change. Again, the media profession was going to change. The idea of the newspaper reporter or the television reporter, you're going to have reporters, and they're going to have to know how to record video, record audio, write for the web, write for other types of, I won't say printed, but written media, where they're words rather than sounds and visuals shown, because that won't go anywhere. People are still going to read. So that's something that's going to go on there. And then attitude and value changes on how we view this media will obviously change. I mean, convergence is all over the place. So that's something that you get there. Obviously, media organizations, against the centralized versus the converged media organization. The centralized is everything is controlled out of one headquarters, where converged media is you've got this part of the company working with this part of the company, working with this part of the company. Here's finance, here's strategy development, here's media production, here's media promotion, maybe distribution over here, and they're all working together because they're doing their part the best. These are the centralized things that work the best, and they know their specific things, so they're working in those kinds of areas. I can guarantee you that Marvel Studios is not controlled out of Disney headquarters. They have given those things, or the Star Wars organization, the Lucasfilms is not controlled out of Disney headquarters. They're not going to control that. They will lend a hand, their expertise, probably with the what's Disney best at? I can't think of the term. Not the franchising, where they deal off little things and the promotional stuff and the selling of the toys and stuff like that. I'll think of the term in a minute. They can help with that because Disney is the best at that. And yeah, Star Wars did it some, but now it's all goo goo gaga with all of the Star Wars films coming out and all of the associated toys and deals and stuff like that. So that's something that works with that centralized versus converged media. Again, it's that centralized, the converge. Again, you're dealing with companies that the best people that handle the things that know their jobs the best help others that know their job the best, and that's where the converged comes in together. Everything isn't controlled from the top. Again, what are the type changes that we're dealing with? We engage with media in a state of flux. Where do we listen to the radio? I mean, used to be the last bastion of that was the car, and now that has even changed because the cars come all with the audio inputs, and you can plug your iPhone or your smartphone in and listen to the radio, listen to your music there. I bought a little handheld radio the other day simply because my old one died, and I just simply want to be able to get a radio signal if the power ever goes out. It's the old part of me that lived in Florida that you always prepare for summer storm season, and my smartphone doesn't pick up radio. I can get the Weather Channel and stuff like that, but I would like to be able to hear from that. So I just bought a little handheld radio. They still sell them. It's $10. So that's the kind of thing that you're looking at there. But most people probably don't listen to the radio. Again, I'm an old fart. I still do listen to the radio. Again, different media are regulated differently and different freedoms and restrictions. The government can regulate what's on the television, the radio, because those use parts of the radio waves, the spectrum, and they have to regulate the traffic on that, so they can say what goes on there. I would say that probably the government will start to do that more and more as more internet signals are done over radio waves, over the spectrum, because the government can control that. That's how the government controls radio and television. They can't control the printed press. They can't control paper. So I would say even some newspapers might balk at this idea, because once newspapers go strictly internet, the government can then control what's on in newspapers and stuff like that, because they're using the spectrum for distribution. So there's all sorts of implementations or implications there. So that's something that you look at in terms of what's going on there. Again, the media content broadcasts a predetermined, prearranged schedule. Little consultation with audiences other than an idea of when people want to listen to stuff. Again, you put the more adult, risque information or entertainment or content on later at night after the kids go to bed. You put the more family friendly on. You put this on a Monday night. That's the kind of thing you think you're going to get the biggest audience. That's about the only thing where audiences come into play there is where do we think we can get the biggest audience. And again, on-demand content is the audiences have control over when they attend to the content, not when the distribution is. They determine the distribution. I want to watch this now, not on Monday nights at 8 o'clock. And digital allows that. And again, that digital production and distribution, content can be available at any time of day. Again, the only thing that will determine how fast that grows is the cost. If it's so expensive, people will balk at paying for it. But the way we're going, basically, advertising is kind of going by the wayside to any grade, to the same extent that it was. And so people are going to have to start paying for content pretty soon. And then wiki content, it's that idea of the production user, the producer, PRODUSER, the production and the user, a producer and user, where the audience contributes to the production and the distribution of the content. Social media, their own blogs, that kind of stuff. So that's what's going on there. And then media use changes. The 24/7 media environment, always on and always connected. I can remember growing up where the local TV stations would sign off at night. They'd play the Star-Spangled Banner and the flag would wave, and then you'd get snow. The signal just went off. And again, mobile technology. We can take our media everywhere. You can watch the thing. Again, my cable company offers me the ability to sign up, and I can watch the television shows wherever I am. And again, that access, knowledge of, and variety of advanced technologies, and they keep getting more and more advanced. Again, it does cost money, but again, it's that use of the distribution channels, which are probably advancing just as fast as the production technology now. Again, there's no buffering, there's no dial-up internet anymore. So that's the kind of changes that we're seeing. And again, distribution, global dialogue, content can be fluid and again rapidly distributed. I've got some people, when I teach summer classes, I've got students that are taking classes over in Europe, or they're in Europe and they're taking my class. Kind of same thing. You can get the Daily Mail newspaper out of the UK or wherever. I'm sure you can get Japanese, Chinese, Australian newspapers just as easy, halfway around the world. So that's something that you're looking at with those media organizations. And then again, the peer-to-peer file sharing, the sharing of files, the sharing of media content, whatever. and again, the user-generated content. That's probably been the biggest thing. The Doritos consumer or commercials, television commercials that consumers produce for the Super Bowl. That's been a big hit, although I do know that Doritos isn't going to do that anymore. The concept has kind of gotten worn. So that's something that you've got to be aware of. And then the media audience changes. One-way communication source to large, anonymous, heterogeneous audience. The television stations send it out, networks send it out, the consumers there, they intake it. The newspapers print it, the consumers read it. The radio stations send it out, the consumers listen to it. There is no two-way communication there. Converged audience, interactive model. They can rate, they distribute their own content if desired. They can basically watch the material that's produced by a content provider. And then the big role now is sort of the watching everything, where a network show or a show that's produced by a production company, they don't have seasons where they do they have one per week that they send out a serial. They release the whole season, and people serial watch the 17 hours of the season in one weekend. It's a different model now, and you can do it whenever you want. Maybe you do want to do it just 1, 2, 3, 1 hour each week for 17 weeks, or maybe you want to do a 17-hour weekend and watch the whole season all at once. It's up to you. It gives the audience their choice. And again, the producer, audience use and consume contemporary media, they're both passive recipients and active creators. Maybe they create their own little spoofs of their favorite shows or something along that line. So that's something that how the audience has changed. And again, the professions have changed. Again, the increased competition, rapid changes in technologies in the marketplace have led to differences. The citizen journalism. Audiences contribute to the story and content and or correction with no formal training in principles of journalism. This does have probably some bad implications, because the citizen journalist probably will not check their sources or corroborate the information. So they're not checking to see if the information is real. Or maybe they're putting the information out knowing that it's not real, just to throw off stuff. So there are huge implications there. So that's something that you've got to look at. Attitude value changes. Again, global digital communication, transparency is gaining trust. The idea of what is privacy. Is anything that you put out there, is your life private? I mean, if you've put out everything on Facebook, are you holding anything back? Do you have a right to privacy anymore? Do you care? Again, behavioral targeting. I mean, you search for something online, and then all of a sudden you get all these little pop-ups about that product or that product type. Advertisers are doing that all the time. I mean, that's a standard advertising procedure now. Seeing what you look for online. And again, using that digital tracking of where you go on the internet, and having that archived somewhere. So there's a lot known about you online. Again, that idea of interpersonal communication within the mass communication. Interactive, face-to-face, generally one-to-one between individuals familiar with each other. Mediated, interactive, generally one-to-one between individuals familiar with each other. again, through an external medium such as a telephone, instant messenger, text, chat room, Twitter, for example. Mass communication, again, technologically based between large numbers of people distributed widely over space and time. The media companies create that and distribute that content. The content creators represent and define the reality of what that content is. Synchronous media advances, audiences assemble simultaneous with the broadcast event, live TV, radio show. I could teach this class every week at 3 o'clock on Monday for 3 hours, and that would be a synchronous class. Whereas asynchronous, the way it is, I create the content, but you're not expected to be anywhere at a single place or time. I create this so that you watch it anytime that you want throughout the week. Again, current environment between mass communication and current convergence. What we're looking at here is the communication, interpersonal and mass communication are blurred. The interpersonal is adopting mass communication characteristics, and mass communication is adopting interpersonal communication characteristics. Email, mediated impersonal communication or interpersonal communication can also be sent to mass numbers. Weblogs, individual writing can also be followed by lots of people. Twitter can be sent to a small number or a mass number of people. The web, the quantity, fragmented nature of websites mean a small dedicated following or a mass following. So you get those things. What are the functions of mass communication? Again, surveillance, making sure that you know what's going on in the world. Correlation, being able to correlate what you do with whatever's happening. And then the idea of cultural transmission, transmitting a culture out to people. And then entertainment, just being entertained. Again, surveillance, information about what's happening in the world. That's usually primarily connected to journalism. Consequences, maybe too much bad news, maybe an apathetic, disheartened audience. Correlation, and the media interpret events and issues, subscribe meetings that help understand what's going on within the larger society. Advertising, journalism, public relations help shape opinions. So again, you could fall into a thing where what do these means? What does this all mean? What does the idea of the 2016 election mean? What does the idea of Trump's ability to send out these tweet storms rather than issue a statement through the normal presidential channels? What does that mean towards us? I mean, so that's something that what the media does. Again, cultural transmission, dominant subcultures from one generation to the next or to immigrants. Socialization, what are the rules of society? Again, that idea of what's going on is something that we look out. What we have there is this idea of what a homogenized culture that might promote mindless watching of certain media, mindless consumption of media without questioning it. Again, the idea of fake news. Do we just take the president's word that all news is fake if he doesn't like it? I don't subscribe to that, because the only thing he calls fake news is what he doesn't like when it's critical of him. So that's something that we look at. In entertainment, obviously, content designed specifically and exclusively to entertain. You think of television, you think of movies, that kind of thing. Our critics argue that mass media encourages lowbrow entertainment and escapism. Well, with some of the things in the news, why not? The one thing that it can do is maybe perpetuate certain stereotypes. So I don't know that it's necessarily bad, that lowbrow entertainment or escapism, because sometimes you'll want to escape reality. Theories of mass communication, transmission models, critical theory and cultural models to transmissional models, source, media, transmission, media, receiver. Basically looking at it that way. Again, the transmission model, Shannon and Weaver. Again, the information source, the transmitter, the channel, the receiver, the destination, the receiver. Back in 1949. And then Schramm's in 1954. The source encodes the message. The signal is transmitted directly or via medium. The destination receives and then decodes the information. And then you have a feedback loop also. And that perpetuates the cycle. And there could be noise in there also where misunderstanding happens. So those are the things that we have going in this kind of thing. So again, this overview, we'll be doing stuff, we'll be looking into this stuff over the entire semester. So that's all for this. There'll be quizzes, there'll be a discussion question. Make sure you look at D2L for that every week.